Good morning. Welcome to Bible study today. We've got the prophet Zechariah in front of us, chapters 9, 10, and 11. So the theme this whole year is the time after God's people returned from exile in the Old Testament. So we started with the book of Ezra. They came back, they started rebuilding the temple, got stuck. God sent two prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, to speak to them. We looked at Haggai already. We looked at how they finished the temple, and now Zechariah is the one who in this time period is speaking God's word to his people. Chapters 1 to 8 have a very similar feel where it's often God shows Zechariah something and Zechariah says, what does this mean? And then God has the angel tell him what it means. There's a big difference now, chapters 9 through 14, so much so that some people would say, maybe it's not even Zechariah, maybe it's somebody else writing this. But as you look at how the Bible talks about this book, we're going to treat it as this is one whole, and Zechariah must have been able to write in different styles. So chapters 9, 10, 11 today are going to feel a lot more like Isaiah or Amos or somebody like that of the prophets from before the time of the exile. Zechariah also has a lot of prophecies about Jesus and Holy Week. And so today we're going to see probably the most famous section in Zechariah, a prophecy that I think is very straightforward and we use all the time. And we're going to have a prophecy, it's one of the most difficult ones about Jesus. And I'm not going to be able to say I understand everything about this prophecy. But the way the New Testament quotes, you could say, oh, I know this is about Jesus too. So we've got all that in front of us today. Let's begin with a prayer and then jump back into Zechariah. Lord God, I pray today that as we open your word, you would open our hearts, that your Holy Spirit would use the words that we hear today to work faith in us and strengthen our faith in you, especially as Zechariah looks ahead and sees the coming of Christ and as he preaches your words of comfort to the people of his time. So please be with us as we study these chapters. Amen. Before I keep talking, anything you have on your mind from the last few chapters in Zechariah? Like the last couple of weeks, we've got to move pretty quickly. We can't slow down and just take one chapter today. The plan is to cover 9, 10, and 11. Here again is the plan for the schedule going forward. Next week we'll finish Zechariah. Week after that is Thanksgiving Eve, so we'll take a week off for Thanksgiving. Then when we come back in December, we'll get into Esther and get back into the history of God's people after the exile. And I guess before we jump in, let me throw a map up. This is from the time of King Saul. This is not the time period we're looking at with Zechariah, but it does show three areas that Zechariah is going to talk about. So if you kind of draw a circle of the different nations that are around God's people, up to the north and northeast is Aram, with the capital being Damascus. So if you think today, that's Syria. And so today, when Zechariah is talking about Damascus, be thinking kind of north, northeast. Phoenicia was north and west on the coast, so Tyre and Sidon were the main cities there. What's in the news today with Lebanon, that'd be what modern Lebanon is today, is Phoenicia back then. Then down on the coast, just to the west of Jerusalem, you've got the Philistines. Time of Saul and David, they were a big threat with militarily too, so David has to fight Goliath. But they're going to show up even after the exile as a people who are surrounding God's people. So Aram, Phoenicia, Philistia, and Zechariah is going to start out with them in chapter 9. Here's a prophecy. The word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, and will come to rest on Damascus. For the eyes of all people and all the tribes of Israel are on the Lord. And on Hamath too, which borders on it, and on Tyre and Sidon, though they are very skillful. Tyre has built herself a stronghold. She has heaped up silver like dust, and gold like the dirt of the streets. But the Lord will take away her possessions and destroy her power on the sea, and she will be consumed by fire. Ashkelon will see it in fear. Gaza will writhe in agony, and Ekron too, for her hope will wither. Gaza will lose her king, and Ashkelon will be deserted. A mongrel people will occupy Ashdod, and I will put an end to the pride of the Philistines. I will take the blood from their mouths, the forbidden food from between their teeth. Those who are left will belong to our God and become a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be like the Jebusites. But I will encamp at my temple to guard it against marauding forces. Never again will an oppressor overrun my people, for now I am keeping watch. So big questions are, what does God say? And is this good news or bad news for God's people? So what's the prophecy that Zechariah has?
It's good news.
You're going to answer the second question first. Is this good news or bad news? Good news as long as you're on which side? When you are part of the Lord's people, then this is good news. So I guess we could take that first. If you go to the very end, what's the good news in this section for God's people?
The bottom part, never again.
Never again will an oppressor overrun my people. God's promise is He Himself is like the sentinel standing watch. He is going to guard His people and not let anyone come in and attack them again. So if you'd say historically, each of those three groups of people in some way or other was opposed to God's people. It would kind of come and go depending on what the time was, but especially the people of Aram and the people of Philistia were often at war with God's people. And so God says, never again will an oppressor overrun my people. I am the one who's standing watch. Where's God's army camp set up? At His temple, which, if you're thinking through the context, how does that fit in with what's going on at the time of Zechariah? They're rebuilding this. So again, as you read through the prophecies in Haggai, Zechariah, think through the historical context is they are rebuilding the temple, and God has words of encouragement for them. So God says, the Lord says, I am standing watch. This temple you're building is like my headquarters for my army, and I am going to defend you. These other nations will never be able to oppress you again. Is it good news or bad news for those other countries? Mostly bad news. There is some good news for them too. But what's the bad news for the people of Aram and Philistia and Phoenicia?
Be deserted.
Pictured in physical destruction. A lot of the picture is that the thing that they're trusting in is not reliable. Did you notice anything as I read through that? What are some things that they're relying on?
Money.
Especially with Tyre and Sidon, their trading empire across the Mediterranean meant that the people of Phoenicia were a lot more wealthy than the people in Judea. So they've got a lot of money. They're also known for being skilled.
Power on the sea.
Power on the sea. They also have a stronghold. If you go back and look at what Tyre was like, it was built on an island. So when enemy armies would come, they would just withdraw onto the island. There were huge walls all around the island. And since they had a powerful navy, they could keep resupplying the city by sea, and it was very hard to put Tyre under siege the way that was conventional for other cities in the area. So Tyre, it looks like, humanly speaking, they have all these advantages. They've got the money. They've got people who not like college education, but they would have been the people who were skilled in trade and in crafting things, and they have a city that seems like it is unconquerable. Any of you know, how was Tyre conquered? About 100, well, maybe 200 years after the time of Zechariah? Alexander the Great actually filled in the ocean and built a ramp out to the city. If you can imagine how much time and effort that took. But they filled in a land bridge, and then Alexander the Great was able to conquer it. So whether or not you'd say that's the only fulfillment that's in mind here, but when you have these nations around Judea who have their trust in themselves, God says, the things that you're relying on are not able to defend you. It's much better that God's people have him as the one who's depending on them. They're not relying on their wealth. Now, I said it's not all bad news. Did any of you catch a little piece of good news for these Gentile nations?
There were a few of them that would join God's people.
A few of them will be left, and they're actually going to join God's people. They will be like the Jebusites. Does that ring a bell for any of you? Who are the Jebusites? And how is it a good thing to be a Jebusite?
They lived around Jerusalem before the Israelites.
Yeah, they actually are the ones who were occupying Jerusalem before David conquered it. So even as the Jebusites were conquered, some of their descendants then became people who lived right in the heart of God's people. So would I expect to see some Jebusites in heaven someday? Yeah, that even in their being conquered by David in Jerusalem, they were assimilated into the people of God. So there are examples in the Old Testament of Gentiles who joined God's people and worship the true God too. So in spite of it being mostly bad news for the people of these other countries, there's a picture of hope too, that the survivors are going to join the people of God. If you compare this with other prophets, Ezekiel has some long sections like this. Isaiah does too. They can be hard for us to hear because I think the way we often look at the world now is that even our enemies, we want to be nice to them when we conquer somebody. So if we go to Afghanistan, we also want to try to rebuild the nation, even as we go to war there. In the Old Testament, you do have the picture of God saying, I'm going to step in and defend you from your enemies. And when God says, I'm going to destroy someone who's attacking you, that's one of the messages that God has that's comfort and peace for his people. Anything else you want to talk about that section before we keep going? Next is a section that probably is the most famous from all of Zechariah, because we use it the most in our worship. Verse 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit. Return to your fortresses, you prisoners of hope. Even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you. I will bend Judah as I bend my bow and fill it with Ephraim. I will rouse your son Zion against your sons Greece and make you like a warrior's sword. Then the Lord will appear over them. His arrow will flash like lightning. The sovereign Lord will sound the trumpet. He will march in the storms of the south, and the Lord Almighty will shield them. They will destroy and overcome with sling stones. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar. The Lord their God will save his people on that day, as a shepherd saves his flock. They will sparkle in his land like jewels in a crown. How attractive and beautiful they will be. Grain will make the young men thrive, and new wine the young women. I wanted to keep reading because I think sometimes we just pick a couple verses out of what is a bigger section of God giving encouragement and hope to the people as they're rebuilding the temple. So central to this section, what's the prophecy about? You could say it's Jesus. They don't know his name yet. What's the prophecy about Jesus? He is going to come. Now, you and I, it's impossible for us to read this without thinking about Palm Sunday because we know how this was fulfilled on Palm Sunday. Is this fulfilled just in Jesus riding in on a donkey? No. You could say it's a bigger prophecy about when the Messiah, when the King comes. So the promise is, your King is coming to you. Any of you, I don't think we use it quite this way as much, but going back in Lutheran worship, what's the other Sunday when this would have been read in worship?
First Sunday of Advent.
You've probably played organ? First Sunday, I've done plenty of times. There's some who say, let's bring that back. For me, it's tough because if you have the same reading twice in 1 year, there's so many other things to use as well. But if in your mind this is stuck only on Palm Sunday, Lutherans have often used it as the beginning of Advent because the bigger thing is not so much Palm Sunday as it is He is coming. So what else is connected with the coming of the King?
There's peace, I mean, gets rid of the weapons of war.
So when the King comes, there's going to be peace. Keep going.
You got a worldwide kingdom.
He's going to rule. So verse 10 says, his kingdom is going to go from sea to sea. Israel's western border was always the Mediterranean Sea. So it's going to start there and go all the way until it runs into another ocean. So in other words, a whole lot bigger than the kingdom of Saul or David or Solomon. Most of the kingdoms in the Old Testament, they had their end at the Euphrates River. So that was as far north as the Israelites really ever had control. The prophecy is that his kingdom is going to start at the river, and it's going to go all the way to the ends of the earth. So when this king comes, he's going to bring peace. His kingdom is going to fill the whole world. What are the characteristics of the king who comes? What's he going to be like? He's going to have huge power, and at the same time, he's going to have this humility about him. That his power is not going to come like a king where it's, I'm going to crush everyone else. He is going to come righteous. How about that for a key word throughout the whole Bible, and especially about Jesus as the one who is righteous and then brings us righteousness through faith in him. He's the one who brings victory. The Hebrew word there is the word for salvation. He's the one who also is lowly, riding on a donkey, and not just on a donkey, on a colt the foal of a donkey. Donkeys were used not just as beasts of burden, but you find the king sometimes riding on donkeys. Just in general, God's people did not ride around on horses a lot. So here you've got a king who's not riding on a war horse, he's riding on a donkey, and that illustrates the truth about him, that he's going to come righteous and victorious, the one who's bringing peace. Other connection, especially with the season of Advent, is verse 9, that the reaction of God's people is one of joy, that everyone is there welcoming him and rejoicing in who he is and what he brings. And so as far as a prophecy that the New Testament very clearly says is fulfilled in Jesus, Here's one that's very famous from Zechariah chapter 9. So if you'd say, where is it quoted? Matthew quotes it on Palm Sunday. John quotes it on Palm Sunday. So Zechariah has a bunch of prophecies that tie in with Holy Week, and this would be one of the key ones. We usually, I think, stop reading in verse 10. So once you get to verse 11, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't remember this part as much. If you look at these next verses, what are some other things connected with the coming of the King? Verse 11, you see how it's connected with the blood of the covenant? When God made the covenant through Moses, there was blood sprinkled on the people. But again, you think of Jesus, and he says that in his blood there is a new covenant. He used those words on Maundy Thursday, that the cup is the new covenant in his blood. And so the promise here is that God is going to free those who are prisoners. There'll people be now who are filled with hope that God is going to restore twice as much as they've ever lost. Verse 13 has an interesting picture. What are God's people in the metaphor in verse 13?
Weapons.
God's people are weapons. So Judah is like which weapon? Bow. So God bends the bow, and what does God put in as the arrow? It's like Ephraim and Judah are a bow in God's hands. They're like a sword, and God is going to use his people against those who are fighting against him. So what's interesting is how quickly there can be a picture of peace and war side by side, both with the coming of the king. And you think of how these prophecies are fulfilled in Jesus. Did Jesus ride around with an army destroying all the Gentile nations? No, he used Jewish people who had the good news, who then went out into the world. And what has conquered the world is not Jesus destroying people in a war, it's the gospel message has now gone all over the world. And so you've got these two pictures side by side of a king who can bring peace while using his people as weapons of war against the Gentiles.
See, Pastor, with the one verse, sea to sea, and the river
The river.
to the ends of the earth.
So when it capitalizes river,
Yeah.
because when does it? So a lot of Bibles will put a footnote on that. I don't know if yours does or not. Because for us, we say there are lots of rivers in the world. What river are you talking about? For them, the river is the Euphrates River. This is saying there's a connection. Psalm 72, may he rule from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. That Zechariah is actually echoing the Psalms with that. So I'd have to look at, it's real faint on this one, but can you follow my cursor? The Euphrates River is the southern one. The Tigris is the one on the north. Euphrates is the one on the south. So those two rivers flow through Mesopotamia all the way to the Persian Gulf. And the southern one, the Euphrates River, that's kind of the northern border of anything God's people are doing. If you go beyond the river, you're like off the map. So the prophecy is that when the king comes, and again Psalm 72 says this as well, it's not just like Solomon, he'll rule up to the river. It's his kingdom is going to start at the river, and then it's going to push out from there all the way to the ends of the earth. So when the king comes, the Lord will appear. He'll be like lightning. He'll, in a way, be fighting a war. Verse 16, it also says that the Lord will be like a shepherd. Keep that one in mind because in the upcoming chapters, that picture of a shepherd is going to come up again. And then the metaphor changes. God's people are like jewels in God's crown. God's people will be like teenagers who have had plenty to eat and have all kinds of energy and are at the prime of life. That's what God's people will be like on the day when the King comes. So good news or bad news? It's some really good news. And think again, the context is people who feel weak and discouraged. They're trying to build this temple, but they don't always have enough money. They don't always have enough food. They seem like they're oppressed by everyone around them. And through Zechariah, God gives promises that are true for them, but also having them look ahead at the time's coming when this king is going to make everything right when the Messiah comes. Let's keep going. Chapter 10. Ask the Lord for rain in the springtime. It is the Lord who sends the thunderstorms. He gives showers of rain to all people and plants of the field to everyone. The idols speak deceitfully. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore the people wander like sheep oppressed for lack of a shepherd. What's the main idea there?
God is the true God, rely on Him.
Rely on God. He's the one who actually provides for you. There are a lot of ways where people can rely on somebody else. Especially in these verses, what is it that Zechariah says, don't do like other people do.
Watch what you listen to or who you listen to.
Watch who you listen to, because connected with idol worship often was people who claimed they could tell the future. That by interpreting dreams or having other ways they could say what the future would bring. And sometimes can people get that right? Yeah. Does anyone know the future aside from God? No. And so watch out, because if you're following someone other than the Lord and relying on what they say the future will bring, you're going to wander around like someone who is oppressed because you're missing your shepherd. So that language of shepherd and sheep is pretty strong throughout all these chapters. Verse 3, my anger burns against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders. For the Lord Almighty will care for his flock, the people of Judah, and make them like a proud horse in battle. From Judah will come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler. Together they will be like warriors in battle, trampling their enemy into the mud of the streets. They will fight because the Lord is with them, and they will put the enemy horsemen to shame. So when God looks around and sees the people don't have a good shepherd, he says, I will step in. I will be their shepherd. And under God's care, his people are strong like a war horse. From them are coming leaders. They will be like the warriors who are winning. Again, more promises about God being with his people. Verse 6, I will strengthen Judah and save the tribes of Joseph. I will restore them because I have compassion on them. They will be as though I had not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. The Ephraimites will become like warriors, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in the Lord. I will signal for them and gather them in. Surely I will redeem them. They will be as numerous as before. Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands they will remember me. They and their children will survive, and they will return. I will bring them back from Egypt and gather them from Assyria. I will bring them to Gilead and Lebanon, and there will not be room enough for them. They will pass through the sea of trouble. The surging sea will be subdued, and all the depths of the Nile will dry up. Assyria's pride will be brought down, and Egypt's scepter will pass away. I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely, declares the Lord. Open your doors, Lebanon, so that fire may devour your cedars. Wail, you juniper, for the cedar has fallen, the stately trees are ruined. Wail, oaks of Bashan, the dense forest has been cut down. Listen to the wail of the shepherds, their rich pastures are destroyed. Listen to the roar of the lions, the lush thicket of the Jordan is ruined. So a mix of a lot of different metaphors and pictures, all of them promises about what God will do for his people when he comes. So we don't have time to go through everything in detail, but if you pick some things off this list, what does God say he will do and be for his people when he comes?
One that struck me was with them coming back from Egypt, and apparently the Nile is going to open up.
So the picture that God is going to gather the people who have been scattered. Why were they scattered? God can say, because I scattered them. That as God calling them to repentance, he had scattered them among the nations. Now God says, I'm going to bring them back. And so one of the pictures is God is going to subdue the waters. They'll pass through the sea. I'm guessing that when Zechariah is saying that, what event are they thinking of? Coming out of Egypt and the Exodus, that God had his people pass through the waters of the Red Sea that destroyed Pharaoh's army. So using some of this language of even God's actions in the past, God is going to bring his people, he'll lead them through the sea of trouble. The depths of the Nile will dry up. So looking at it as both directions, Assyria to the north, Egypt to the south, God is going to gather his people together again. Somebody else pick another one.
It'll be like it was before.
It'll be like it was before. How often still today don't people wish they could turn back the clock to some glory days? And the Bible uses that language too, that when the Messiah comes, it'll be like the times when everything was good. Has there ever been a time when everything was perfect since the fall of sin? No, and yet in our hearts we long for things to be right. Sometimes we look ahead and say, well, maybe the future will be better. Other times we look back and say, I wish it was more like it used to be. And so using that language for, there were good times in the past when the people very clearly lived under the blessing of God. And so this picture of, I'm going to make it like it was before. Anybody else? One that jumped out for you? It's not the main one here, but you notice there are a couple times where it's like, it'll be like they've been drinking wine. Which I think is interesting, because some people would say, like, alcohol is a bad thing. The Bible always condemns drunkenness, but to say, it'll be like God's people have been drinking some wine. And here it's with the joy in their hearts and celebrating together. There are going to be good times when the Messiah comes. and God saves his people. Picture of there being children running around, that's part of it too. Chapter 11. The flip side is all those around. Again, these would be the same areas that were talked about in the beginning of chapter 9. Those same areas that were opposed to God's people, it's like the big trees will all be cut down. That God, as he saves his people, is also able to destroy those who fight against God's people. And once again, you've got shepherds in the picture. And that's going to play in the rest of chapter 11 too. I moved a little more quickly through that because I want to get to this section at the end of 11. But we don't need to go too fast. Is there anything in chapter 10, early part of 11, that you'd like to talk about more?
He's going to take pride away from a lot of these nations, like the Assyrians. Assyrians were always terrible for God's people.
And this self-reliance of, we're great on our own, we don't need the Lord. That whenever people have a pride in themselves, in the end, whether in this world or on Judgment Day, people are going to realize if my boasting was in myself, that's nothing.
And back the pride from the Philistines, too, because they were giants. They didn't.
Yep. Relying on your own wealth or your own physical strength or your own security and walls off on your island like Tyre. That's a huge contrast to God says to his people, rely on me. Your hope is that I am with you. I'm the one standing guard for you. When I come, there will be joy. When I come, there will be peace. Those are the promises here in Zechariah.
Pastor, I like verse 12 that says, I will strengthen them in the Lord, and in his name they will live securely, declares the Lord. Stay the course, right? Don't wander, don't fray, because when you stay the course, you're strengthened and secure. It's just kind of reassuring.
And knowing the historical context, is this because the people are politically strong or militarily strong or economically strong? Not when Zechariah is talking to them. That even the people who seem weak and who seem poor, God can stay. Just stay in me. You'll live securely. I will be your strength, declares the Lord. The rest of chapter 11 is different. It's this extended prophecy that has some different parts. All of it is about shepherds, but it takes it in a very different way than how you often hear the shepherd language being used. So I've got a blue commentary on Zechariah, and its comment was, this is one of the hardest sections of the whole Bible, end of Zechariah chapter 11. Partly because we're not living in that context, where they may have known things that were going on that we can't connect the dots. So the big question will be, in what ways is this fulfilled? The three big options would be, is this fulfilled in things that are happening around Zechariah with people at his time? Another option would be to say, is this looking at the whole Old Testament history and describing that in terms of these shepherds? The third one, we can say we know this, is that this is also a prophecy about Jesus. Because there'll be a section here that's going to sound really familiar, because Matthew quotes it as a prophecy fulfilled in Jesus' passion. So it's probably best to describe it as a combination of those. That there were things going on in Zechariah's time that this fits with, that there are things that are true of the whole Old Testament time of God's people, and that this is talking about how Jesus is going to be coming. Before I read it, just what's kind of the normal shepherd story? So who's the shepherd? Jesus, or God is the shepherd. Who's the flock? God's people are the flock. So it's going to use that kind of language, but in a way that's kind of shocking and jarring. So let me just read through it, and then let's talk through what are the different sections, what can we say or not say, and then for sure, let's take a look at how does Matthew use this about Jesus. This is what the Lord my God says. Shepherd the flock marked for slaughter. Their buyers slaughter them and go unpunished. Those who sell them say, "Praise the Lord, I am rich." Their own shepherds do not spare them. For I will no longer have pity on the people of the land, declares the Lord. I will give everyone into the hands of their neighbors and the king. They will devastate the land, and I will not rescue anyone from their hands. So I shepherded the flock marked for slaughter, particularly the oppressed of the flock. Then I took 2 staffs and called one favor and the other union, and I shepherded the flock. In 1 month I got rid of the 3 shepherds. The flock detested me, and I grew weary of them and said, I will not be your shepherd. Let the dying die and the perishing perish. Let those who are left eat one another's flesh. Then I took my staff called favor and broke it, revoking the covenant I had made with all the nations. It was revoked on that day so that the oppressed of the flock who were watching me knew it was the word of the Lord. I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. Then I broke my second staff called union, breaking the family bond between Judah and Israel. Then the Lord said to me, take again the equipment of a foolish shepherd, for I am going to raise up a shepherd over the land who will not care for the lost, or seek the young, or heal the injured, or feed the healthy, but will eat the meat of the choice sheep, tearing off their hooves. Woe to the worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm and his right eye. May his arm be completely withered, his right eye totally blinded. And that's the end of the prophecy. Is this one you've looked at before, or is this kind of a new one? It kind of has 3 sections. The first part through verse 6 is God speaking to Zechariah. The middle part's this action prophecy where Zechariah takes 2 staves and does stuff with them. And then the end, God says he's going to raise up another shepherd. So just taking the whole thing as a whole, what is it that's so surprising about this prophecy? And maybe not just one thing, there are a bunch of things.
It's full of awful stuff.
It's full of awful stuff. Especially when, for the most part, Zechariah is a message of comfort and peace to God's people.
The people are rescued.
You're hoping for like a happy ending at the end, right? Where it's like you'd think that at the end it's God says, well, I'm going to replace the bad shepherds with a good shepherd. God actually replaces the bad shepherds with somebody who's just as bad or worse. Other thing that's kind of jarring is that if you're looking for Psalm 23, where there's this beautiful picture of shepherd and sheep getting along in a beautiful relationship, it's actually the opposite, where here the picture is a shepherd and a flock that are totally at odds with each other. Anything else to add to the list? Just things that are shocking. What does the shepherd do with the flock? he says, the purpose of my flock is to slaughter them. And there's a point when the shepherd says about the flock, I'm going to quit caring for you. I'm going to let you be destroyed. Even, why don't you just go and eat each other? The shepherd says to the sheep. So if you look through it more, the other thing throughout is the fact that this relationship is so bad. Whose fault is it?
The shepherd.
I would say it's actually the other side. There are issues with the flock where it's not that the shepherd is the one who is bad. It's that the sheep, in different ways, have so rejected the shepherd that the shepherd says, fine, if you are rejecting me as your shepherd, I will then reject you. So in the opening section, it describes a situation where you have shepherds who are not really caring about the sheep. You've got shepherds that are instead saying, we'll just take advantage of the sheep for our own profit, as if the sheep are only there for slaughter. Are there examples of that from the time after the exile? Yeah. When we get to Nehemiah, you'll see how Nehemiah tries to step in as a leader who actually is caring for the people. He has to step in and stop some people who are taking advantage of the poor, things like that. Is this true of many of the leaders throughout the Old Testament history? Yes. In the middle section, Zechariah then is shepherding the people with two staves, and it's like Zechariah's role overlaps with the Lord as the shepherd. So he has these two staves, which is odd because usually a shepherd only have one, and he names them. What do the two staves symbolize? The first one is called favor, and later on it's connected with the covenant that God made with his people. So that when Zechariah breaks that staff, that is God saying the covenant that I have with you is broken. Second staff is, and the unity is shown as a unity among all of God's people, especially the northern and southern kingdoms, so that this also is a good thing in the hands of God, but that when the sheep reject the shepherd, what does God do with that staff? He breaks that staff. So that the covenant that God had with his people and the unity among them, both of those are things where God, the shepherd, says, I will break those, not because I don't care about my people, but because of what the sheep have done to me. So verses 8 and 9, the fault really isn't placed on the shepherd, it's on the sheep. And whether real sheep can do this, again, this is people's relationship with God. What does verse 8 say about the flock? The flock detested me. So God is speaking as a shepherd of people who have rejected him. And not even as a we don't care about you, but as an actual we despise and hate you as their view toward their shepherd. So then Zechariah breaks one of the staves, and that's explained as the covenant that God had with his people is broken. And then verses 12 and 13. This shows the disdain of the sheep for the shepherd. God says, pay me what you think I'm worth, and what is God paid? The value set on God as the shepherd is 30 pieces of silver. What's God's reaction to that? All right. God says that's the same as you saying I'm worthless. Is God going to accept that? No. So then the instruction of Zechariah is throw that, some sarcasm, that handsome price at which they prize me, take that 30 pieces of silver and throw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. Here's where, is this ringing bells with you in the New Testament? Where is this passage quoted as being fulfilled with Jesus? Judas betrays Christ, and how much is Jesus valued at? 30 pieces of silver, which you look at how that number is used in the Bible, it seems to be about the price of a slave, which is not just pocket change, but is it the price that really ought to be placed on God as the shepherd, and especially on Jesus Christ as the Messiah? No. So Judas is paid 30 pieces of silver to betray Jesus. Then when Judas tries to give the money back, what did Judas do with the money? They refused to take it back, so he just took it and threw it somewhere into the temple. And then they picked up the money, and what did they use the money to do? They said, this is blood money. We can't just put this in with the other offerings for the temple. They said, we've got a use for this money. We're going to use it for buying a field where we can bury people who don't have a grave, who come in from out of, let's say they're just passing through town and they die, and we have no place to bury them. Let's buy a field where we can bury people like that. And so they buy the potter's field. And so as Matthew's writing his gospel, he says, wow, do a lot of things all come together in that betrayal of Jesus that fit with the language of Zechariah. What's interesting is that when Matthew quotes it, he says he's quoting from Jeremiah, which has always made people scratch their heads. It seems the best answer is that Matthew is combining some prophecies from Jeremiah and from Zechariah. Jeremiah is the other one who had prophecies that dealt with a potter. And since of the two, Jeremiah or Zechariah, Jeremiah is the one who's the best known. Matthew quotes from Jeremiah, he says, as he combines some of these prophecies together. But very clearly, he's using thoughts also from Zechariah chapter 11. After the shepherd is sold for 30 pieces of silver, and he rejects that and throws the money back, then Zechariah takes the second staff he's been using, and he breaks that staff. And I think this is like Ezekiel had a lot of action prophecies too, where the prophecy was something he actually acted out. So I don't know if I'd say that I know for sure, but it sure sounds like Zechariah is actually doing this with a physical staff. He has this as an object lesson where he breaks a staff, and what does that symbolize? The unity of God's people is also broken. And then, like some of you said, well, I was hoping for a happy ending. Like, sure, we had this conflict, sure that we had a bad shepherd or the flock was bad, but let's have it all work out in the end, right? But the way the prophecy ends is, he says to Zechariah, put on like you're acting the part of a foolish shepherd, which is not so much a shepherd with a low IQ or who doesn't know what he's doing, but act the part of someone who is unfaithful and not the good shepherd. Verse 16 is a great example of what a pastor ought to be in reverse. So what should a spiritual leader be? Someone who does four things: who cares for the lost, seeks the young, heals the injured, feeds the healthy. So kind of in a reverse way, you could say that's still a description of what should I strive to be as your pastor. Pastor means shepherd. Of those four, I suppose I'm trying to feed the healthy this morning. Although maybe some of you, maybe we all have our own sicknesses too, that we have ways we're all weak too. But to be somebody who does those four things, but instead God says, rather than somebody like that, I'll send someone who eats the sheep tearing off their hooves. At the same time, God says, woe to that shepherd, because does God love his flock? Yes, he does. Does this section mean that God stops caring for his sheep? No. But if you want an example that's kind of the opposite of Psalm 23, this section in Zechariah 11 talks about sheep and a shepherd, where the sheep detest their shepherd, don't value him as being worth anything, and the shepherd then says, fine, I will stop taking care of you. What's hard is to say, what's the exact way where this was fulfilled in Zechariah's time, or bigger than Zechariah's time? Any of you have some thoughts before I share some things I've been thinking or reading? Sally?
I couldn't help but think, as we were talking about, where's the good in this? Where's the happy ending? I was kind of thinking about how we as sinners kind of sugarcoat sin. And for me, this is unsugar-coated, unescapable sin, and how serious God is about it. And I didn't know the verse, so I searched it, that right before the flood, when God saw that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. That's kind of what I thought about this.
So just in general, are the flock people who ought to be sheep? Does that mean we're always cuddly and cute? And no. And even today, would it be possible for people to rebel against God or say we don't value you as being worth anything? That's always a danger in hearts, and why even today there are things from the prophet Zechariah that are good for us to hear too. So if chapter 9 was this beautiful message of when the king comes, all the blessings he'll bring, chapter 11 is a warning of what happens for sheep who reject their own shepherd. So you're thinking kind of people in general.
I was thinking sin in general. This is how God views sin, and I know, sometimes we just don't take it seriously enough.
Is he also setting the stage not just for the condemnation of sin, but the connection to keeping the law perfectly, that self-righteousness, and preparing the path for gospel of Christ alone, with the breaking of the staff and the covenant?
The fact that God's going to make a new covenant with his people, you see that in the prophets. The fact that the old covenant, there needs to be something new after that. I think our minds go there, knowing Christ not to. I think the question is, were there issues going on among the spiritual leaders of Zechariah's day? Like it says, I'll remove 3 shepherds on one day. Were there 3 people who would have been in mind at Zechariah's time? If there were, that's something we don't know. So one commentary I read said there's a list of like 40 different possibilities people put together of who 3 people might be who might fit that. It also could be something that's more just looking at God's people in general. If you look at the time before the exile, that there was a time when a lot of the leaders were not good leaders and who led the flock astray. And God said, fine, I will allow the Babylonian captivity to happen. Perhaps that's what's part of what Zechariah has in mind too. If you look ahead to Jesus, who fits this description of a flock that rejected the voice of the shepherd, it would not be everyone who was Jewish at the time of Jesus, but if you look at the leaders of Jesus' time, Jesus himself told some parables about people who rejected the voice of God. I think of the one where there's a vineyard, where the tenants of the vineyard put to death the son and refused to listen to the owner. John's gospel speaks very directly about how the people are refusing to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd. So this section is fulfilled in Matthew's gospel as well, when the people who ought to have been religious leaders at the time of Jesus rejected and sold out the Messiah. So if you'd say, is Zechariah only a message of gospel and peace and comfort, here'd be an example of a warning using the picture of sheep and shepherd, of sheep that reject their shepherd and don't value him. And the shepherd says, fine, I will break both of my staves. So as much as you're hoping for a happy ending, come back next time because there will be a lot more gospel in the next chapters. But just highlights from today, at least for me, chapter 9, the king is coming. He's going to rule the whole world. He brings peace. This picture of God being with his people. We don't have to rely on our own wealth or our own skill or our own military might. God says, I'm the one who's guarding my people. And a warning, too, that says, if you and I would despise the shepherd and say, you're not worth anything to me, be careful, because there have been plenty of people in the past who have done that very thing to God, too. So today, let's close with a prayer. Lord God, I pray today that you would be our shepherd and that we would be your sheep. Not at all like at the end here, but the way you talk in other places in Zechariah and throughout the Bible, that you would be the one who cares for us, who feeds us, who leads us, who brings us to green pastures forever in heaven. Pray too that we'd be sheep who listen to your voice, who don't rely on ourselves, but who follow you, who trust in you, who hold on to you as the one who's more precious than anything else in all of life. So please be with us, go with us, and bless us today. Amen.